The air in the courtroom was a stale, refrigerated thing, thin and smelling of old paper and cheap polish. It did nothing to cool the hot prickle of indignation on my skin. Across from me, my daughter, Amelia, sat beside a man in a suit that looked too tight in the shoulders, her face a perfect mask of aggrieved motherhood. It was a face I had not seen in 13 years, and it was a lie. Her lawyer had just finished his opening statement, his voice dripping with synthetic sympathy as he painted a picture of a distraught mother whose children had been stolen, systematically alienated from her by a cruel, possessive grandmother. He used the word kidnapped. The word hung in the silent room, a fat, buzzing insect, ugly and venomous. My own lawyer, a kind but weary public defender, had patted my hand before we began, but now he shifted uncomfortably. He knew the facts, but he also knew how this looked. An old woman, clinging to the children of her vibrant, younger daughter. It was a story as old as time. But my story had a different ending. When it was my turn, I did not speak. Instead, I rose slowly, my joints complaining in a language only I understood, and approached the bench. I handed the bailiff a single, thick manila envelope, sealed with yellowing tape. The judge, a man with a tired face and eyes that had seen every flavor of human misery, took it with a sigh, as if expecting another rambling, handwritten letter. He slid it open. As he pulled out the contents, his expression shifted. The weariness evaporated, replaced by a sharp, focused attention. His eyes scanned the first page, then the second. His brows drew together. He looked up from the papers, his gaze finding Amelia, then flicking to me. A profound stillness settled over him. He cleared his throat, his voice now stripped of its judicial drone, leaving only the raw sound of a stunned man. "Do they know about this?" he asked, his voice low, gesturing with a trembling hand toward the thick stack of papers. He was not looking at the lawyers. He was looking only at me. I met his gaze, the cold, heavy anchor of my 13-year silence finally finding its purpose. "Not yet," I replied. "It began on a Tuesday." I remembered that specifically because Tuesday was the day I changed all the linens. A holdover from a lifetime of managing a home, a rhythm that persisted long after my husband, Robert, had passed. The air smelled of lavender starch and the faint, sweet scent of the climbing roses Robert had planted under the kitchen window. The grandchildren were there for the weekend, as they often were. Liam, at 8, was a serious boy with his father's thoughtful eyes. Chloe, 6, was a whirlwind of pink tulle and scraped knees. And little Noah, just 4, was my shadow, his small hand perpetually tucked into mine. Amelia had been a storm cloud all morning, her phone buzzing incessantly, her replies clipped and sharp. I had learned long ago not to ask questions. Asking Amelia a question was like poking a wasp nest. You were sure to get stung. She was dressed to go out, in a dress too thin for the autumn chill and heels that clicked impatiently on my polished oak floors. "Mom, I have to go," she'd said, not looking at me, her attention on her reflection in the hall mirror as she applied a slash of crimson lipstick. "It's an emergency. A friend needs me. I'll only be an hour. 2 at the most an hour." The words were a puff of air, meaningless, but I'd clung to them. I nodded, of course. I always nodded. I was her mother, the reliable port in the endless storm of her life. She kissed the children's heads with a theatrical smack, the scent of her perfume, something sharp and expensive, lingering in the air long after the front door clicked shut behind her. The children, used to her comings and goings, barely registered her departure. Liam was deep in a book about dinosaurs, Chloe was giving her dolls a stern lecture, and Noah was carefully arranging blocks into a teetering tower on the living room rug. I watched them, a familiar ache settling in my chest. They were beautiful, brilliant children, and they deserved a mother who saw them as more than an inconvenience. A brief stop between one crisis and the next. The first hour passed. I made them lunch, peanut butter and jelly sandwiches with the crusts cut off, just the way they liked. The second hour bled into the third. I called her phone. It went straight to voicemail, her recorded voice a cheerful, lilting thing that bore no resemblance to the strained woman who had left my house. "Hey, you've reached Amelia. Leave a message and I'll get right back to you." I did not leave a message. By the time the sun began to set, casting long spooky shadows across the lawn, a cold dread had started to seep into my bones. It was a physical sensation, a slush of ice water sloshing in my gut. Chloe started asking, "When is Mommy coming home?" Her voice was small, a little wobble in it that broke my heart. I told her soon, a lie that felt like ash in my mouth. I made them dinner, bathed them and read them stories, my voice steady while my mind raced. The house grew quiet. The rhythmic breathing of 3 sleeping children was the only sound, a fragile piece in a world that had suddenly tilted on its axis. I sat in the dark living room, the phone in my lap, a cold, useless weight. I called her again and again. Voicemail. I called her friends, the few whose numbers I had. They were evasive, their voices tight with feigned ignorance. Something was wrong. This was not one of her usual flights of fancy. This felt different. This felt final. The week that followed was a blur of sleepless nights and frantic, hollow days. I kept the children on their routine, a desperate attempt to maintain a sense of normalcy that I did not feel. School, homework, meals, playtime. I moved through the motions like an automaton, a smile plastered on my face for them, while inside a silent scream was building. The hope I'd clung to in the first few days curdled into a bitter, terrifying certainty. She was not coming back. She had left them. She had left them with me, an old woman on a fixed pension, in a house filled with the ghosts of a life that was already over. She had untethered herself from the burden of her own children and sailed away, leaving me to manage the wreckage. The anger, when it finally broke through the shock, was a living thing. It was a dense, hot stone in my chest, so heavy it was hard to breathe. How could she? How could any mother look into the trusting faces of her children and simply walk away? The children were the anchor that kept me from floating away on a sea of grief and rage. They needed me. Their confusion was a tangible thing in the house. Liam retreated into his books, his silence a heavy shield. Chloe's boisterous energy flattened into a quiet, watchful sorrow. She started sucking her thumb again, a habit she'd given up a year before. But it was Noah who broke me. A few weeks in, he woke up from a nightmare crying for his mommy. I rushed to his side, gathering him into my arms, his small body trembling. "It's okay, sweet boy," I soothed, rocking him back and forth. "Grandma's here." He looked up at me, his face streaked with tears, his big dark eyes filled with a pain no 4-year-old should ever know. "I want my mommy," he whispered, and the sound of it cracked open the dam I had built around my heart. I held him and wept, my tears soaking his hair, my sorrow mingling with his. We cried for the woman who wasn't there, the woman who had shattered our world with her absence. In that moment, holding my sobbing grandson, something inside me shifted. The rage did not disappear, but it cooled, hardening from a molten flood into something solid and sharp. It became resolve. These children were not a burden. They were my blood. They were innocent. And I would not let Amelia's selfishness destroy them. I would protect them. I would raise them. I would be the mother she refused to be. My best friend Margaret lived 2 doors down. She was a retired legal secretary, a woman with a mind as sharp as a tack and a spine made of pure steel. She had watched my grandchildren grow up from her porch swing, always ready with a cookie or a kind word. She saw the change in me before anyone else, the strain behind my smile. One afternoon, she found me in my garden, yanking out weeds with a ferocity that had little to do with horticulture. She sat beside me on the stone bench, her presence a quiet comfort. "She's not coming back, is she?" Margaret asked, not a question but a statement of fact. I couldn't speak, only shake my head, my throat tight with unshed tears. She took my soil-stained hand in her own. "Then you need to protect yourself, Eleanor. You need to protect those babies. This world isn't kind to women like us, the ones who clean up everyone else's messes." Her words were a splash of cold, clear water. She told me to document everything. "Write it all down," she insisted. "Every penny you spend on them. Every doctor's visit. Every parent-teacher conference. Every birthday party. Keep every receipt. Start a journal. Write down what happened exactly as you remember it. One day she might come back. And when she does, she won't be the same girl who left." People like that, they rewrite history to make themselves the hero. You need the truth written in ink. That night, I bought a thick leather-bound ledger and a box of pens. I sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I had helped Amelia with her homework, and I began to write. I started with that Tuesday. I described her distracted energy, her flimsy excuse, the exact words she used. Just for an hour, then I found the note. She had tucked it under a magnet on the refrigerator, A flimsy piece of notepad paper I hadn't noticed in the chaos of that first day. It was short, her handwriting a frantic scrawl. "Mom, I can't do this. I'm sorry." Just for a little while I stared at the words, the lie of an hour exposed by the pathetic truth of a little while. I taped the note carefully to the first page of my ledger. It was evidence. It was the beginning of my secret plan. A plan born not of vengeance but of survival. I opened a new bank account, a separate one just for the children. I transferred a portion of my meager pension into it each month. I used that account for everything: groceries, clothes, school fees, co-pays for scraped knees and winter colds. I kept every single receipt, filing them by month and year in expanding accordion files that soon filled an entire closet. The ledger became my nightly ritual. After the children were asleep, I would record the day's expenses, down to the last penny for a pack of gum or an ice cream cone. But it became more than just a financial record. It became a chronicle of our lives. I wrote about Liam's pride when he won the school spelling bee. I wrote about Chloe's terror and bravery on her first day of kindergarten. I wrote about the day Noah finally tentatively called me Mama, a slip of the tongue that he quickly corrected, his cheeks flushing red, but the sound of it resonated in my heart for weeks. I also sought legal counsel. I found a family lawyer in the next town over, a woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. I paid for the consultation in cash, a roll of bills I had saved from my grocery budget. I told her the whole story, my voice trembling at first, then growing stronger as I laid out the facts. She listened patiently, her expression grim. "You need to file for legal guardianship immediately," she advised. "Right now you're in a gray area. She could walk back in tomorrow and take them, and you'd have little legal recourse. Guardianship will protect you and, more importantly, it will protect them. It provides stability." The process was daunting. A mountain of paperwork and court appearances. I had to notify Amelia, sending certified letters to her last known address, which were all returned unopened. The court had to post notices in the newspaper. It was a humiliating public declaration of my daughter's failure. But I did it. A judge granted me full legal guardianship 6 months after she disappeared. The official, gold-sealed document went into a safe deposit box, but a copy, crisp and clean, went into the manila envelope with the note and the growing stacks of receipts. The envelope was becoming my armor. The years spooled out, each one a thread weaving a new life for us, a life without Amelia. We became a family, not a temporary arrangement. I was no longer just a grandmother, I was their parent in every way that mattered. I was the one who taught Liam to ride a bike, who held Chloe's hand at the dentist, who helped Noah build a prize-winning volcano for the science fair. I attended every school play, every soccer game, every parent-teacher conference. I was Mrs. Gable, Liam, Chloe, and Noah's grandmother, the woman who was always there, a fixture as reliable as the school bell. I learned to navigate the world of modern parenting, a world of cell phones and social media that was utterly foreign to me. I learned to text, clumsy at first, my thumbs fumbling over the tiny keys, but I learned. I had to. I had to know who they were talking to, where they were going. I was their only line of defense. There were, of course, moments of profound difficulty. Raising 3 teenagers in my 70s was a challenge I could never have anticipated. There were arguments about curfews, worries about grades, and the silent, brooding moods that seemed to descend without warning. There were times I was so bone-tired I felt I couldn't take another step, my body screaming in protest at the relentless pace. My pension was stretched thin, and there were months we ate more casseroles and pasta than I care to admit. I took up mending and became an expert at patching jeans and darning socks. We never had much, but we had enough. More importantly, we had each other. The subject of Amelia was a ghost that lived in the corners of our house. The children rarely spoke of her as they grew older. They had their own memories, faint and fuzzy for Noah, sharper and more painful for Liam. On their birthdays I would watch them, wondering if they were thinking of her, if they were waiting for a card or a call that never came. I tried to be honest with them in an age-appropriate way. I told them their mother loved them very much, but that she had problems, grown-up problems that made it impossible for her to be with them right now. I never badmouthed her. I never called her selfish or cruel, though I thought it 1,000 times a day. I wanted them to form their own conclusions. I wanted them to be free of the bitterness that had taken root in my own heart. Her actions or lack thereof would have to speak for themselves. Once, when Liam was 16, he found an old photo album with pictures of a younger Amelia, smiling and holding him as a baby. He sat with it on the floor for a long time, his face unreadable. "Why did she leave?" he asked me later that night, his voice quiet. The question was a straight, clean shot to my heart. "I don't know the whole answer, honey," I told him, my own voice thick with emotion. "I think she was lost. And I think she didn't know how to ask for help." It was the kindest truth I could offer. The letter from the lawyer arrived on a crisp October morning, 13 years and 2 months after Amelia had walked out my door. Liam was in his second year of college, living in a dorm an hour away. Chloe was a freshman at the same school, and Noah was a junior in high school, a lanky, quiet boy with a passion for photography. The envelope was thick and expensive, the law firm's name embossed in the corner. My hands trembled as I opened it. The words leaped off the page, cold and clinical. Amelia was back. She was petitioning the court to terminate my guardianship and regain custody of her minor child, Noah. The letter was filled with accusations that I had unlawfully detained the children, that I had systematically poisoned them against their mother, that I had stolen their childhoods for my own selfish reasons. It was a masterpiece of fiction, a complete inversion of reality. She was not just rewriting history. She was trying to burn the library of our lives to the ground. The hot, dense stone of anger I had carried in my chest for 13 years, the one that had cooled into a hard resolve, now began to glow with a white-hot heat. After all this time, after the silence, the abandonment, the utter disregard for the lives she had created, she was coming back not with an apology, but with an accusation. She was not coming back for her children. She was coming back for a fight. And this time I was ready. I called Liam and Chloe at college. I read them the letter over the phone, my voice shaking with a rage so pure it felt like a physical force. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then Liam spoke, his voice low and hard, the voice of a man, not the little boy she had left behind. "She can't do that, Grandma. We're not going with her." Chloe's voice was full of tears. "After all this time? Why now? What does she want?" I told them I didn't know, but that I would handle it. I told them not to worry. But I was worried. I knew what she wanted. She must have gotten herself into some kind of trouble, or perhaps she saw a payday. Noah was still a minor. Maybe she thought she could claim 13 years of back child support from a phantom father, or sue me for some imagined emotional damage. Her motives were always tangled in a web of selfishness and greed. I called the public defender's office, my heart sinking. I couldn't afford the kind, no-nonsense lawyer from years ago. My savings were gone, spent on college tuition and braces and all the endless expenses of raising 3 children. I was assigned a young man who looked barely older than Liam. He was earnest and overworked, and when I told him my story, I could see the doubt in his eyes. It was a he said, she said situation, and my daughter had hired a shark from a downtown firm. He promised to do his best. The night before the court date, I pulled the manila envelope from its hiding place in my cedar chest. It was heavy, bulging with the weight of 13 years. I sat at my kitchen table and went through it one last time. The tear-stained note, the guardianship papers, the photographs, a chronological tapestry of our life. Liam in his cap and gown at his high school graduation, Chloe beaming with her braces at her first dance, Noah proudly holding up a monstrous fish he'd caught at the lake. And the ledgers. Stacks of them now. I had spent hours with Margaret and a calculator, tallying up the columns. The final number was staggering. A monument to my sacrifice, written in dollars and cents. It was the price of 3 childhoods. I put everything back in the envelope, sealed it, and felt a strange calm settle over me. I had the truth on my side. And the truth was heavy. And so I found myself in that cold courtroom, watching the judge's face as he sifted through the evidence of my life. He read my neatly typed summary of expenses, his eyes widening at the final total. He looked at the guardianship papers, his mouth a thin, hard line. He lingered on the photographs, his expression softening as he saw the faces of my grandchildren grow from round-cheeked toddlers to confident young adults. Finally, he picked up the original note Amelia had left on the refrigerator, holding the flimsy piece of paper as if it were a sacred relic. He read the scrawled words aloud, his voice echoing in the silent room. Mom, I can't do this. I'm sorry. Just for a little while. He then looked at Amelia's lawyer. Counselor, your client's petition states she left the children with her mother for an hour. This note, dated the day of her departure, would suggest otherwise. Furthermore, it seems your client made no attempt to contact her children or provide for their welfare in any capacity for 13 years, a period during which Mrs. Gable here provided not only a home, but full financial support, the total of which is frankly astonishing. Amelia's face had gone from a mask of confident victimhood to a blotchy, panicked canvas. She started to speak, to object, but her lawyer put a restraining hand on her arm. He was pale. He knew a losing battle when he saw one. Your Honor, he began, his voice strained. My client was young. She was in a difficult situation. The judge cut him off with a sharp wave of his hand. He wasn't looking at the lawyer. He was looking at Amelia. His eyes filled with a cold, undisguised contempt. A difficult situation that lasted for 13 years? 13 years during which your own mother, a pensioner, raised your 3 children? She clothed them, she fed them, she educated them. And your response upon your return is not gratitude, not remorse, but to accuse this woman of kidnapping. He shook his head, a gesture of profound disgust. The petition to terminate guardianship is denied with extreme prejudice. Furthermore, I am referring this case to the district attorney's office. I believe they will be very interested in the matters of child abandonment and quite possibly perjury. A gasp escaped Amelia's lips. The color drained completely from her face. She looked at me then, her eyes wide with a mixture of hatred and disbelief. She had expected a frail, weeping old woman. She had expected to win. She had not expected the ledger. She had not expected the note. She had forgotten who I was. The woman who kept the records, paid the bills, and remembered everything. The judge banged his gavel, the sound cracking through the tension like a gunshot. It was over. I had won. But it didn't feel like a victory. Just felt quiet. The rage that had fueled me for so long had burned itself out, leaving behind an empty, peaceful space. I walked out of the courtroom and into the bright, indifferent sunlight. My grandchildren were there, waiting for me on the courthouse steps. Liam, tall and strong, his arm around Chloe, who was weeping silently. Noah stood slightly apart, his camera hanging from his neck, his eyes fixed on me. They rushed to me, enfolding me in a group hug, their strength and love a solid wall around me. We heard, Liam said, his voice thick. We were standing in the back. We heard everything. We went to a small diner for lunch, the kind with cracked vinyl booths and thick, comforting milkshakes. No one spoke much at first. The events of the morning were still settling. Finally, I reached into my large handbag and pulled out the manila envelope. I placed it on the table between us. The judge asked me if you knew about this, I said softly. I told him not yet. I slid the envelope toward them. Now you know. Liam opened it. He took out the papers and together the 3 of them began to read. I watched their faces as they saw it all laid bare. The note, the guardianship papers, the endless columns of figures in the ledger, the photographs of their own forgotten childhoods. I saw the flicker of old pain in their eyes, but I also saw something new, understanding. A final, sad, and complete understanding of the mother who had given them life and the grandmother who had given them a life. Chloe looked up from a picture of herself on her 10th birthday, a gap-toothed smile on her face as she blew out the candles on a cake I had baked. Tears streamed down her cheeks. You did all this for us, she whispered. All by yourself. We were never by ourselves, I corrected her gently. We had each other. Noah, my quiet, observant Noah, picked up the note, the one his mother had left on the fridge. He stared at it for a long time, then looked at me, his eyes clear and steady. She wasn't coming back for us, was she? He asked. It wasn't a question. No, honey, I said, the truth finally allowed to breathe in the open air. I don't think she was, he nodded slowly. Then tucked the note back into the envelope. He slid it back across the table to me. A gesture of finality. A chapter was closed. We were free. The weight I had carried for 13 years, the fear of her return, the anger at her betrayal, it was all gone. It had been replaced by a deep, quiet peace. My life had been derailed, turned upside down by my daughter's selfish act. But in the wreckage I had found a new purpose. I had found a love deeper and more profound than I had ever known. I had been given the gift of raising these three incredible human beings, and they, in turn, had saved me from a lonely old age. That evening we sat in the living room, the same room where I had waited for Amelia all those years ago. But now it was filled not with dread, but with warmth and laughter. Liam was telling a story about a disastrous chemistry experiment, and Chloe and Noah were howling with laughter. I watched them, my heart so full it felt like it might burst. My sacrifice had not been a sacrifice at all. It had been an investment, and the return was this. This love. This family. This life. The moral of my story is not about revenge, though there is a certain dark satisfaction in seeing a manipulator face the consequences of their own creation. The true lesson is about the nature of love. Love is not a feeling, it is an action. It is showing up day after day. It is cutting the crusts off sandwiches and staying up late to help with homework. It is documenting every penny, not to hold a grudge, but to build a fortress of truth. My daughter thought I was weak, a soft-hearted old woman she could manipulate and discard. She was wrong. My heart is soft, yes, but it is also resilient. It is a heart that learned to turn the deepest betrayal into the fiercest love. A love that built a home, raised a family, and in the end won the war she never even knew I was fighting. What would you have done in my place? Could you have found it in your heart to forgive? Or is some betrayal so deep that the only path forward is to build a wall of truth and wait? I often wonder what my life would have been like if Amelia had just been gone for an hour, as she promised. It would have been quieter, certainly. Lonelier, definitely. It would have been a lesser life. Sometimes our greatest blessings come disguised as our heaviest burdens. Let me know in the comments where you are hearing this story from. It warms my heart to know how far these words can travel. If you've enjoyed this story and would like to support the channel, please consider liking the video and subscribing. Your support, through comments or even a super thanks, allows me to continue sharing these experiences with all of you. There are many other stories waiting for you. With heartfelt greetings. Until next time.